So, speaking of Elspeth, let's talk about Elspeth von Draken. So, you've all...
And it's only the reason why we're here.
Yeah, so you've all seen her, you've probably all played her by now, but there's a lot of really interesting things to discuss with her as a character. Also, real quick, I do want to call it Morgan Crescent. Thank you very much for the bits that says, the Countess seems to very much exemplify soft power, which is so rare and awesome to see. Yeah, it's pretty cool. She does wield a lot of soft power.
Just as a small aside, it's something that Warhammer is sorely missing. The idea that you can be influential without going to war. And Warhammer, obviously, it's in the name.
Yeah, because the tabletop game doesn't support
but the tabletop game doesn't support it, so those characters are entirely sidelined. The role-playing game attempts to do it, but sadly, their biggest opportunity to properly consolidate that was when he was in campaign, and it didn't happen.
Yeah. So, with Elspeth von Draken, we had something really exciting come really out of left field from Forge World, which is that they delved into giving us a really big character who introduced a lot of really new things. Which this leads into a discussion that I promised I would have on the stream, which is why I hated Elspeth the first time I read about her.
I'm actually intrigued to know this one because I loved her the first time I read about her.
Yeah, because when so to kind of set the stage, when I was enjoying Warhammer Fantasy in 8th edition, when Tarmogon was on its way to coming out, for me at the time, the Empire to me very much came off as the everyman faction in the sense that they had access to a lot of tools, but they weren't necessarily by any means the best at any of them. They were sort of a jack of all trades, master of none type situation, in that, you know, it's like they have knights, but they're not the best knights. Or they have wizards, but they're not the best wizards. They have fighters, they're not the best fighters. They have monsters, but they're not the best monsters. But you can tap into every single category, which was really nice. And the thing I always loved about the Empire was the sense of regular humans, normal people, fighting against genuinely impossible odds, of fighting against demons and dragons and elves and dwarves and all these other horrible things. And through the classic steel faith and gunpowder, they managed to hold the line, where it was more about skill at arms and formations and clever use of stacking their various bonuses together to create something that could defeat their opponents, despite the fact that they were often completely overpowered and completely outnumbered by their enemies. Which usually when you have both of those things going up against you, you're gonna lose. But the Empire manages. And I'll remember the first time I cracked open Tarmogon getting to Elspeth's page. And Elspeth, to put it very bluntly, especially the way her rules were written, almost comes off more like a demigod character compared to everything that came before. Of that, if you compare her to like Balthazar Gelt, who the story, even within the Tarmogon book, presents as like, he's the greatest wizard in the colleges of magic. He's the supreme patriarch. He's super badass. He's super cool wizard. Yada yada. And Elspeth comes out of nowhere, and it's like, oh yeah, here's a really powerful wizard who's pretty much just as good. But she rides on a dragon, which riding dragons was not really a thing for the Empire. Only the Emperor himself could ride a dragon, and virtually nobody ever did that because there wasn't a model for it, so you had to make it yourself, so nobody went through the pains of dealing with it. And on top of that, when you read Elspeth's background and her rules and stuff, one of the things about Elspeth is that she's so heavily what's the word I'm looking for? She's so like drenched in death magic that she's not really human anymore. It basically said, like the book quite literally says that she's got 1 foot in the land of the living and 1 foot in the land of the dead. She's not undead, but she's not really fully alive necessarily anymore either. She's almost kind of semi-spectral in this sense that she doesn't really age. She's been around, I think it says she's been around for like 3 generations, as far as everyone knows. So she's been around for a long time, and she comes off as this almost like I even think she has the ethereal rule under certain conditions, of that she's this ghostly spirit-like apparition that is basically inhuman. There's very little left about her that is human. And as the main big character that was representing the Empire, Young B looked at that and went, this doesn't represent the Empire. This isn't what I imagined. Like, for me, the Empire is all about humans, like people, rising up and fighting. And this is a fucking vampire count character on a non-zombie dragon. Like, it's literally just a vampire count on a lord on a zombie dragon, but made slightly more alive and even more ridiculous and powerful. And I hated it because I felt that she spat in the face of everything that I wanted the Empire to be.
Let's give a counter view, because I didn't have that reaction. I remember when I first read the book, I was making my way through, and Elspeth's Greenpeace story going, interesting. They're not gone with an established character that is created their own. And my first thought is always, I wonder if that's because they don't know about the other characters, or whether they're just making one up because that's easier to do than
Little A, little B.
contradicting anything. Now, that's where my mind always goes. I was reading it, and I went over to her stats, and I went, nice, her stats are rubbish. She's terrible. And then I took a quick look through her magic items, and I went, oh, nice, look at her rules. This is the first time they've shown an Imperial Wizard the way they've been described for the last 20 years. When they get old, they are weird. Proper weird. Vigo Hicks, who I mentioned, is, if anything, worse than her. He is older than her, and he is much more. He's possibly died multiple times. In fact, his apprentice definitely has died at least 10 times. And come back again because they are the masters of the Wind of Death. And it was like, wow, someone's actually dialed this up to. Now, this is where it might come as a surprise to many. They've dialed it up to 9. They've finally gone a little bit further, and they've matched that to what they actually are described as being able to do. This is shocking to me, because I'm so used to the Empire being presented as absolute bullshit. Yet somehow being the most powerful force in the old world. There's a reason that Teclis didn't want humans to have magic the way they were having it, because it would change them into something else. Up again and again. And we got a character that did it. And they put her on a fucking dragon. And that for me was awesome, because I've converted 4 different Empire Generals and dragons since I was a kid. I did it mostly for 3rd and 4th because I could. And that was fun. And we played like 50, 60, 100,000 point battles because we were mental when I was young. And that to me just made me smile, because finally we got a wizard who was comparable, top tier one. This wasn't one of the standard battle tier wizards who actually represents what top tier wizard would do. And both Gelt and Cyrus Gorman would probably kill her because of the Staff of Ball. The Staff of Ball is giving them effectively total power, or whatever version of it you go with. It just belts out spells that are literally ridiculous. And I was quite happy with that. I was like, yeah, that's cool. That's brilliant, in fact. We've got ourselves a top-tier wizard, and she's been specifically written not to be interested in politics, to have removed herself. We can see why she's not center stage. Everything about her makes sense, and it also changes the tone of Null in a way I'd never considered before. I kind of loved it. And it's really fascinating to see how different people respond to the same thing.
I do want to say that this was young Sotek, where I had never read any of the Warhammer Fantasy roleplay stuff. I'd only read the army books, and I'd only read Black Library novels, which don't give a really shit view of the Empire. Like, if you want to learn about the Empire in particular, you need to read so much other material, because the battle game just does a shit job of exploring it.
It really does.
It's like, I love Elspeth now, but that's because I got into reading all of the roleplay stuff.
And ditto, I love Elspeth now as well, and over time, I didn't use her multiple times because of her character. She just didn't need to pop up in a roleplay game because she was using it.
It'd be weird to run into her.
But I was really intending on deploying her in the Enemy Within. When I was running the Enemy Within, she was marked to pop up the first time in Book 5 of the Enemy Within, but she didn't, because I didn't run that book again because I resigned. But she was going to pop up in that because
she's in the current one. I don't remember which one.
The username. I marked her.
I know she's in one of the books. I don't remember which one. She's in one.
That makes me happy because she was in all the notes that I gave. And she's enormously important because she is a consolidating point for the Countess's power. And the Countess, she doesn't get off with what she does for free. The Countess gives her stuff not for free. There's a reason that she can do all the things that she does. The Countess. And the Countess is arguably one of the most powerful women, not just women, people in the old world. And she's part of that power base. And to try and deploy the Countess without showing just how important that was to it would have been ridiculous, particularly given that she's not necessarily the most powerful wizard that was in the Countess's arsenal as well. There's been another couple of other sources, very powerful. Blue, for example, Celestial.
Yeah.
So that's all super fun.
Yeah, so with those in mind, let's talk about some actual aspects of her character. Of that, so we have Elspeth von Draken. It's noted she comes from like a